4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome everyone. At a time when the Middle East is shifting under the weight of old rivalries and new calculations, the perspective of some experts like Dr. Robert is especially valuable. Dr. Sotloff is the executive director of the Washington Institute in Washington, D.C., and one of the leading voices on U.S. Middle East policy and Arab-Israeli affairs. From Iran's nuclear ambition to the ripple effects of normalization across the region and the deepening complexities in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria, there's a great deal at stake. Let's start with Iran, still the geopolitical fault line for so much of what follows. Dr. Sotloff, thank you for being with us. Netanyahu's visit to the United States and the White House underscored the concerns about Iran's nuclear program, particularly given the intelligence suggesting Iran could rapidly produce weapons-grade uranium. And so the question, how has the U.S. or the recent U.S.-Israel strikes impacted the nuclear timeline of Iran? And what specific challenges do you see or foresee for the United States and Israel in preventing further escalation or breakthrough, given the divide also politically in the United States and Congress about the damage done?
So it's first important to put the current set of challenges in a broader context, because the challenges are real, the challenges are life and death. The attack on Iran damaged but didn't destroy Iran's nuclear program. Iran is a wounded animal that may try to break out, but it's important to get a bit of context. And the context is this, that the Middle East today is in a far better situation in terms of the balance of peace, security, and stability than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And that's because Iran and its broader proxy network, which seemed on the march, which seemed able to confront America and its local partners. It attacked American allies in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, in Israel. It attacked American allies across the region over the last 5-6 years. They seemed on the offensive, but today they have suffered a terrible blow. Iran suffered a terrible blow from Israel and the United States. Hezbollah suffered a terrible blow. The Assad regime is gone. Hamas suffered a terrible blow. Proxies around the region are on the defensive. So the basic picture is very positive. It's only within that context should one begin to address the question, the tactical question you posed, which is important. And Iran may very well have an increased incentive to move ahead with its nuclear program through secret centrifuges, through secret facilities, through its cache of enriched uranium. It may very well, and that's why it was important for President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu to reaffirm that they're ready to attack Iran again if Iran doesn't take the path of diplomacy, but chooses instead the path of confrontation. That choice is Iran's, and it's up to Iran to make the wise choice. They're not going to get a nuclear weapon. That is clear. The United States and Israel, working separately or together, is going to prevent that. But Iran may try again, stupidly as that may be, and the choice, however, is theirs to make. So one would think that the potential for an agreement with Iran, which relieves sanctions on Iran in the context of Iran forswearing, giving up enrichment, giving up its own ability to create nuclear enriched material, giving up the lion's share of its ballistic missile program. You would think that the deal is in the works, that it makes sense. Of course, Iran may have a very different idea. This is the Islamic Republic that operates on a very different set of incentives than most regimes. So we cannot take this as a foregone conclusion. As for Hezbollah, ultimately the responsibility will fall to the government of Lebanon. The Israelis can do a certain important amount through their own military action against Hezbollah, but ultimately the act of ensuring that Hezbollah does not have the weapons to coerce the Lebanese population, that doesn't have the weapons to blackmail Lebanese voters in the next parliamentary election, that's going to be something that the Lebanese government will have to take care of, and it is part of the ceasefire agreement that it's their responsibility to disarm all militias in Lebanon, including Hezbollah, not just in the south, but throughout the country.
But many in Lebanon, whether they are pro-Hezbollah, whether they are Shia or not, there are some voices in Lebanon, including Christians from different political parties, that they would say that how could we disarm a party when the Lebanese army is not as strong, and simultaneously we listen to extremist voices from the extreme far right in Israel saying that we want to expand. Lebanon is part of our land. Some part of other countries surrounding Israel is our land. How would those voices would be calmed down or reassured, do you think?
Look, regrettably, the Middle East for thousands of years has been filled with extremist ideas. We have to cut through the noise and focus on what is real national policies here. And there is no national policy in Israel to extend Israeli territorial aspirations beyond the international frontiers with Lebanon. You want to have a debate about the West Bank? There's a real debate about the West Bank, absolutely. You want to debate about Lebanon? There is no debate about Israel's aspirations to claim Lebanese territory. That doesn't exist. This is a canard made up by people in Lebanon who want Hezbollah to keep its weapons, fed by certain crazy comments by far extreme, irrelevant people in Israel. Serious people need to focus on serious issues. And what is important is that the next election in Lebanon reflect the new political reality. It would be horrible if the next election in Lebanon reflected an old political reality when Hezbollah was still a powerful, dominant movement. But Hezbollah has been cut down to size. But yet, if they are still allowed to keep weapons and aim them at Shiite voters throughout the country, then we're going to get this skewed election result, and Lebanon will never be able to move forward and have reform at home and peace abroad, which it deserves. And so, hopefully, the government of Lebanon will fulfill its responsibility, confiscate all militia weapons. It was very interesting what the head of the Druze movement, Walid Jumblat, did recently, publicly acknowledging that, in the current environment, we need to hand in our weapons to the state because we're in a new era, and that was realism.
So you think he was reading the global affairs situation in the region, and he was saying it out loud?
Exactly. That was realism. Now, he did it voluntarily. Okay, maybe Hezbollah isn't going to do it voluntarily. I'm sorry, but the Lebanese armed forces is a far stronger, exponentially stronger military force today vis-a-vis Hezbollah than ever before. If not now, when? Because Hezbollah is only going to take the time and opportunity to squirrel away more weapons and gain more ability to confront the LAF. So now is the time.
Now is the time. Also, people would talk about the Abraham Accords and the regional normalization. The Trump administration continues to prioritize the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Beyond the existing signatories, what tangible progress do you see, if any, towards a normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, particularly considering Riyadh's stated condition of a Gaza ceasefire and a pathway to a Palestinian state? We don't see this path discussed by the Netanyahu government.
You're right. I think that we have to inject a little realism into this discussion as well. There is no doubt that the road to normalization between Riyadh and Jerusalem passes through the end to the Gaza war. I do think that's a real possibility. Hopefully, it is something that Donald Trump can help engineer, building on his successful support of Israel and Iran in confronting the Iran nuclear challenge. Hopefully, Donald Trump can bring about an end to the Gaza war. I do think that the balance has shifted a bit, in the sense that I suspect that the end of the Gaza war will be such a significant event that it's likely to require the Saudis to demand less in terms of the pathway to Palestinian statehood. That the sheer extreme violence of the Gaza conflict has been so great that its end itself will be so celebrated that it may itself be significant enough, or at least compensate for some of the political progress some of the Saudis have said they wanted toward a Palestinian state. There'll be such relief in the Middle East at the end of the Gaza war that opportunities may present itself.
The last term of the Trump administration, Trump tried to keep this legacy. First, the Abraham Accords, and then second, the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, while the annexation of the West Bank was happening. And Saudi Arabia came to say that we're not going to have the pathway for normalization without the pathway to a Palestinian state. Do you think this is still applicable today?
I think it's very, very, very difficult to imagine that there will be normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel if the government of Israel proceeds with annexation of territory in the West Bank that is not done in agreement with the Palestinian Authority. In agreement with the Palestinian Authority is one thing, but annexation of territory that is imposed on Palestinians, I think will put a stop sign, a bright red light in front of normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Looking at Syria and Lebanon, Israel has expressed interest in normalization. How do you assess the prospects of such or for such agreements, especially given Syria's demand for the Golan Heights withdrawal and Hezbollah's firm stance against disarming until Israel withdraws from southern Lebanon? What are the potential consequences for Lebanon if also Syria normalizes relations with Israel, but Beirut does not?
So with Syria and Lebanon, I think we all need to take a deep breath. We're not going to go from where we are today to peace and normalization tomorrow. This is going to be a process with both countries. As you say, with Syria, there is a very significant territorial component to as an obstacle to peace and normalization. So the two sides claim the Golan Heights as part of their national patrimony. The United States, in fact, recognizes that the Golan Heights is now a legitimate part of Israel. Syria adamantly disagrees. Now, that doesn't mean the two sides are stuck in neutral. there are all sorts of things that they can begin to do. They can begin to build upon their disengagement agreement, deepen it, broaden it, add an economic component to it. There's all sorts of mutual interests that can be addressed short of peace and normalization. Maybe at the end of the road, there's a way to address the territorial dispute, but they're not going to begin there. They're going to begin with more urgent mutual interests. With Lebanon, it's very interesting. There's virtually no territorial dispute, unlike the Syria case. The minor, a couple of yards here, a couple of yards there, that is not a territorial dispute. That's a technical issue that geographers can work out with surveying equipment. It is essentially a political issue with Lebanon, a political issue that can be addressed through appeal to political interest. And I do believe that once certain things are done, namely once the Lebanese state becomes the sole sovereign source of military authority in the country, once there's an election of a parliament in Lebanon that reflects this new reality, which will happen barely 9 months from now, then Lebanon could very well be set for a sprint toward peace and normalization that benefits greatly the Lebanese people very quickly. I think the opportunities with Lebanon are actually enormous. Regrettably, there's a political impediment, not a territorial impediment. It's more of a mindset that is driven by Hezbollah's continued control of weaponry that blackmails a key part of the population. Settle this, and I think the path to real peace between Israel and Lebanon is very real.
Let's talk about Gaza, the West Bank, and the future of Israeli-Palestinian relations. Despite a tentative 60-day ceasefire proposal, a permanent resolution in Gaza remains elusive, with Prime Minister Netanyahu facing strong opposition from his far-right allies regarding ending the war. What is your assessment of the likelihood of a lasting ceasefire in Gaza, and how do domestic political pressures in Israel, especially the dynamics with Netanyahu's coalition, shape this approach?
So, look, ultimately, leadership is about making decisions. And the leadership in Israel, namely the Prime Minister of Israel, will at some point have to make a decision about competing priorities. On the one hand, there is the opportunity to anchor Israel in a set of peace and normalization agreements with every country surrounding it, that takes advantage of these partnerships to isolate Israel's adversary, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and that elevates Israel as the hub of this network of like-minded states that want to help each other and in the process build a more peaceful, prosperous Middle East. That is a real, I mean, it almost sounds like lions lying down with lambs, but that is a real possibility. Alternatively, Israel can continue to fight a never-ending war in Gaza against the last Hamas guy standing. I think ultimately the Prime Ministers will make a decision.
So many reports, Dr. Sotloff, we're witnessing so many aid points. Right now, civilians are dying. It's not only Hamas.
No, regrettably, this is absolutely true. I mean, I continue to hold Hamas ultimately responsible for maximizing Palestinian civilian deaths. But those don't make the deaths go away. I agree with you completely on this. I do think there are other ways to address the security situation in Gaza. I do think that the opportunity of an Arab and Palestinian military presence with Israel, the Israeli forces withdrawing to the periphery of Gaza rather than deployed throughout Gaza, is a distinct option. And I'm hopeful that we can get there very quickly. It's difficult to see an alternative that doesn't eventually get there, and I would rather get there more quickly and save both Palestinian civilian and Israeli lives in the process.
The deal of the century proposed a vision for Palestinian statehood that was largely rejected. In light of the current conflict in Gaza and the ongoing tensions in the West Bank, do you believe there is any viable path forward for Israeli-Palestinian peace? And what role, if any, can the United States or Trump administration play in reviving meaningful negotiations?
So here again, I do think we have to recognize a certain political reality that this front, the Israeli-Palestinian front, has suffered a terrible blow. However difficult this situation between Israelis and Palestinians was on October 6th, 2023, it is immeasurably more difficult as a result of what happened on October 7th, 2023, and the last 21 months of conflict. I remain, perhaps quixotically so, I remain a strategic optimist about the long-term potential for a resolution between these two parties, but I'm not so optimistic that I think it's going to happen anytime soon. So I think we all need to recognize that there's going to be multiple speeds here. The question is whether they're moving more or less in the same direction, though at very different speeds. And I think Arab states can move much more quickly than Palestinians can move because of what has happened over the last 21 months.
Thank you, Dr. Saatlov, for the clarity and the insight. This conversation wasn't just about policy questions, it was defining choices that will shape the region's future for better or worse. We appreciate you helping us cut through the noise, and thank you for watching us.
It's a pleasure. Happy to participate.